Hilda Paredes, who's going to speak to us today. I can see that we've got visitors coming from all over actually, which is lovely. So not just RNCM. And I'm aware that we've got people joining us on YouTube as well. Just a few things that we'll be handing over to Hilda in a few minutes. Hilda will do her presentation and then we'll have questions. If anybody on YouTube would like to contribute to those questions, they should email research@rncm.ac.uk. It's a real pleasure to welcome Hilda this afternoon's research forum. She is a leading Mexican composer of her generation, and she's been based in London for 35 years now. She collaborates with poets and artists from Mexico, but also from music and artists from all around the world. Among her compositional output, there's a number of electroacoustic works which she created at IRCAM, SWR Experimental Studio and CIRM, where she created the electronics for her opera Harriet, Scenes in the Life of Harriet Tubman, the American abolitionist. And this opera is from 2018 and it is the subject of today's talk. She received the Ivors Composition Award in 2019 for the opera. She has had much recognition, for example, from the PRS for Music Foundation, the Guggenheim Fellowship, Rockefeller, and other international fellowships. She has had many commissions from prestigious ensembles throughout the world, such as the Trio Arbos, Arditi Quartet, Collegium Novum, Zurich, Contrechant, Ensemble Intercontemporain, Hilliard Ensemble, Safa, and I could list many more. She's been performed at many international music festivals, including Huddersfield, Edinburgh, and at festivals in France, Germany, Austria, Japan, Amsterdam, Poland, New York, Brussels. Again, I could say more. She's been a lecturer and is a lecturer and tutor in many US institutions. And I was particularly interested in the Darius Milhaud professor at Mills College, because I did my thesis on my first book on Darius Milhaud. So I thought that was a lovely, interesting connection. She studied with Peter Maxwell Davis, Bert Whistle, Rodney Bennett, and studied first of all at the Guildhall School of Music at Masters at City University and a PhD at the University of Manchester. She's published by the University of York Music Press. So it's an absolute delight to welcome her today to talk about addressing political and social issues in musical composition. So please welcome Hilda Paredes.
Thank you, Barbara, for such a wonderful introduction. And thank you very much for inviting me to this prestigious forum. It's an honor for me to be here. Well, as Barbara said, I'm going to talk. We don't have much time, so I want just to dive into the subject matter of Harriet Tubman, who is probably not known to many on this part of the world, is known to everyone in the US. She was one of the first abolitionists in the 19th century. And when I was first when I first approached my soloist, Clarence McFadden, who is a solo that plays Harriet in my piece, it was her that suggested we did something on Harriet Tubman. And like you, I didn't know who she was. This was in 2012. And since then, it began a most wonderful journey of discovery about the life and the extraordinary achievements of this woman, because she was born a slave, and she was one of the first fugitives from the South traveling north. And in the process of doing so, she gradually became the leader of one of the most important networks, the Underground Railroad, that would help fugitives from slavery traveling up north. So the opera tells basically the story of her life, or some of the most important parts of her life, because she lived a very long time. Nobody knows exactly where she was born, because of course birth certificates and those things were not to be had by slaves, not many of them, but she probably lived a good over 90 years. She died in the early part of the 20th century. So the opera starts telling us about her childhood, where she was employed, being merely 4 or 5 years old. She was employed by the master of the house to look after a baby. She was barely a baby and she was already looking after a baby. So I'm going to let the music speak because it's quite descriptive and it's in English, so you will all be able to understand. Here we go.
I am the child of 2 slave parents, Rit and Ben. I am Araminta. Years old, 5 years old. Little Lord, baby, please go back to sleep. Little Lord, baby, don't cry me back to bed. just finishing. I was with you. Later, when you knew how to keep your eyes open in the long run. During nights of travel, when you became the leader. In the dark.
So, one of the things that fascinated me the most when I started doing my research on this extraordinary woman was to find out that how they developed a code to communicate. Harriet was illiterate, like most of the slaves of the time. They were not allowed to learn. They were not encouraged to learn. Of course, that would have been a threat to the slave owners. So the way they were able to communicate between them was to send messages through music. So many of those spiritual tunes that we all know, we all have heard in our life in one way or another, many of them were used to be able to send messages between each other. One, for example, Still Away was the tune used to alert the fugitive that was, all the fugitives that were to escape that night, to get ready, because it was going to be done that night. And to the slave owners, of course, this was just slaves singing. It didn't really mean anything. So in the whole of the first act basically tells the story of her youth and childhood. In her youth, he was also hit by a piece of metal that one of the slave owners, not the slave owners, the caretakers threw at a running boy. And we don't know whether Harriet tried to interfere to protect this boy or that if it hit her by mistake. The fact is, this piece of metal hit her, and she was unconscious for 3 days. And of course, there was no doctor, no one to take care of her. And after 3 days, she was sent back to the fields to work. She was about 14 years old when this happened. And as a consequence, she developed narcolepsy. So it was quite dangerous when she was taking the fugitives, because she became a leader, taking a lot of people from the south to the north. She first escaped by herself. She was married. Her birth name, as we saw in this example I just played, was Araminta Ross. But all the fugitives had to change their names after they escaped. So she kept the name of her husband, John Tubman, and changed it to Harriet. So she left and she came back a year later for her husband, but he already had another wife. So instead she took some members of her family, some friends, and she did that. She kept coming and going many times. And in this process, she became the leader of the Underground Railroad. This was a network assisted also by white Quakers who would help the fugitives, give them food and shelter on the way up north. So I'm going to play the next example from Act 2, which talks about the Underground Railroad.
She knew the marshes and rivers of Maryland and South Carolina. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. She always came in the winter to pick up her cargo when nights are long. They ran on Saturday evenings, a day or two in advance along the Liberty lines. Newspapers printed runaway notices only on Monday morning. Back and forth, back and forth, up, 13 times. Always on foot over the mountains. Back and forth, back, up, north, back, south, up. The South. With gangs of fugitives. Her brothers and sisters. Some people had to stay where they dropped and died. Some would insist on returning. Dead nigger tell no tales. You go on or die. Concealed in the woods they saw their pursuers pass on their horses. Slave catchers with bloodhounds posting on fences and trees. Rewards for fugitives. At one time she went to a station of the Underground Railroad to find food, but she dared not go back to her people till night. Happy spirits, they listen, eager and hungry. Grief nor sorrow, pain nor shall no more distress Susan. First time I go by singing this song, don't come out till I know the coast is clear. If I sing it again, come out. But if you hear me sing, go down, Moses, we down in Egypt land. Don't come out, for there is danger in the way.
So, quite an extraordinary life this lady had. So for me, the challenge to write this piece, the more I found out about her life, the more I felt restrained for the resources I had with the commission of having 3 instrumentalists, and at the start it was just 1 singer. So luckily they gave me an extra singer to help, and of course electronics, which I did at the center in Nice, the Center of Research for Electroacoustic Music in Nice. So so this was an important piece of the puzzle, because otherwise how do you tell such a story with such limited resources? So in the process of doing the research, it's quite tricky, because she was illiterate, so therefore there was no autobiography. So there are several biographies, several articles, and it's only a collection of testimonies of people that knew her, of what she said, what she did, and so the piece is riddled with these testimonies that have been collected on her life. So the end of Act 4, it's her message to President Lincoln, because she was, as I said, she was an abolitionist before the Civil War, and in fact during the Civil War she was called in to be a kind of advisor, or to give some aid, because she knew the geography on the ground of the place. So she was like a spy for the Civil War, and she was a leader of a battle at Combahee River, which actually they won, and she claims to have liberated 800 slaves without losing a soul. So it is at the end of this battle that her message to President Lincoln comes in the piece. And the epilogue of the opera is like a fast forward, 5 minutes of fast forwarding into the 20th century of all the civil rights struggle, without including, of course, what we are experiencing right now after George Floyd died, because I finished the piece 2 years before this happened. Sadly, the piece is still up to date with the subject matter, and hopefully we'll be able to see it after lockdown, because we had a performance cancelled at the South Bank. So I'm going to play you the end of Act 4 and the epilogue.
I am a poor Negro,
But the Negro can teach Master Lincoln how to save money and young men's lives. God won't let Master Lincoln beat the South till he does the right thing. He can do it by setting the Negro free. Suppose there was an awful big snake down on the floor. It bites you. You call for the doctor to cut the bite. And while the doctor's doing it, the snake springs up and bites you again. So it keep doing it till you kill it. Now that's what Master Lincoln ought to know.
train has not yet arrived to its destination.
Oops. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you so much, Hilda, for a fascinating insight into your opera. Really wonderful to watch and to hear this, and also for you to give a context. And what strikes me is that the title of your presentation is about addressing political and social issues in music composition, and obviously in this case in opera. I wondered if you wanted to talk to us a little bit about the challenges and the opportunities of having a historical subject that perhaps is not so well known in this part of the world as it is in America. So having, in a sense, to give enough of a narrative, but also perhaps the challenges of dealing with such an important historical subject.
I think I have found in opera, whenever I write an opera, the ideal platform for addressing issues that for me have been very important all my life. I have been preoccupied by, I come from Mexico, a country that suffers from great poverty, great inequality, and a history full of social injustice. So it's very much part of my upbringing. And like any Latin America, it's part of your DNA almost. So before writing Harriet, I did an opera in that was premiered in 2003 that was precisely about the cultural impositions in Latin America on the native communities, basically the indigenous communities in Mexico. And so this has been something that it's important for me. I also have done other music theater pieces in which I address the problems with gender, like the piece The Land of Honey, which deals with a real story of human trafficking in the border with the US for prostitution. So these are all issues that are important for me, and I find that opera is a very good platform for me to be able to give a voice, basically, to these people and these women that we still haven't been able, as a society, to give justice to.
That's a wonderful response, and I wondered if you, by looking at these important social and political issues, do you find that you reach communities that otherwise wouldn't necessarily engage with these issues? Do you find it's able to take you to different places?
Well, sadly, opera is a very complicated production-wise. So I wish it could go everywhere. Harriet, however, has traveled a lot because it's a very small scale, even being a small scale production, which has just a handful of performance on stage, but the whole production team with the sound and projection, because we hardly have any props. Everything is done with video, but that requires people sitting at the desk, as well as the lighting. So it's a big team to travel. So it went to Mexico. It had 2 performances there. It's been in a few places in the Netherlands because it was commissioned there. We worked with Music Theatre Transparent, is based in Antwerp. It's been to France, and it went to Huddersfield, and as I say, the performance in London was cancelled because of COVID. So hopefully, I think there's some interest in Japan even at the moment, but at the moment everything is up in the air, like for every one of us. We don't know what's going to happen and when can things go back. As you see, there's a lot of no social distancing between the singers, so this is an issue that would have to be restaged, re-rehearsed if we were to do it at the moment.
There's so many people in this virtual room who share the frustration about, I think, everyone here with the performing arts and the difficulties of live performance at the moment. So it's a real issue, but fascinating to hear that. And I'm very aware I'm hogging too much the questions. So please, can we have questions? Do you want to put your hand up either using the little icon, or if you happen to be visible to me? I can't obviously see everyone, but who would like to ask the first question? I might have to volunteer someone. It's a pity we don't have Adam Gorb here because of his Annual 17 clearly addressing very sex trafficking and very important issues through opera. I'm thinking also of Laura Bowler with her work on in a number of political issues, including the environment. So who would like to go on?
Someone is raising their hand.
Oh, great. I can't see it. So who is it?
Zakia?
Zakia, here we go. Thank you.
Hello, Hilda. That was really, really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned that you were struggling with the forces that you had available to you. And so I wondered, when you were at the stage where you were choosing what instrument was going to be part of the production, how you made that choice given the weight of that storytelling behind it.
Harriet was a bit of a Frankenstein in a way. It started being something quite small, and it started becoming something quite big. So in the first instance, I thought of having, I think the instrumentation was set from the beginning. I wanted to have a clarinet because the clarinet is of Hermes Ensemble, also play the saxophone and the bass clarinet, so I could have more on the lower part. But that was not to be, because when we started with this production, there was very little money. There was very few people participating. And gradually, people started getting interested in the subject and the piece in the production, so we started getting more people coming on board in the production side. But by then I was already more than half the way through the score, so I decided to resolve that with electronics. But I wish I had a big ensemble and electronics. Yeah.
Who wants to ask the next question? I'm looking for hands. Okay, George.
Hi, George. Nice to see you.
Hi there, Hilda. Hope you're well. Thanks very much for the talk.
I was wondering.
I was wondering about the use of found materials, the spirituals, and whether you started off with that idea, and if so, did it have a sort of marked effect on your musical language throughout the piece?
I think I played you quite a lot of examples that have that, but there's a lot of the piece that don't have that. And there was a lot of research done to try and find exactly which tunes were used for what. So everything in the piece, the tunes are used like she did. And the one very difficult piece to tune to find was the hymn that I played you in the second example I played you, because it was a religious hymn. So I had to go through the Library of Congress, and someone from the Library of Congress sent me to someone. So it was quite a protracted journey. But I had the words for that tune, but I didn't have which piece it was. So at some point somebody told me, well, she used to change the words and sing anything. So I was just about going to do that when I found the real tune. So the tricky thing is to insert that into the musical dramaturgy of the piece. And because it's not illustrating, it's telling, it's part of the story. So these beats that go underneath when she's telling them, and these repeated notes, for me, this is the heart that sometimes gets faster and faster as the fear grows. Yeah.
Who would like to ask the next question? I'm looking, if somebody can spot a hand. Oh, Gavin, thank you.
Hi, Hilda. It was so lovely to see that footage. I mean, it's absolutely captivating to look at. And I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the multimedia elements and about how they're involved in the storytelling, whether they have specific roles, either with plot or creation of period.
The design was done based on a kind of maquette done on a MIDI, basically, and just with the electronics coming in. And because the designer doesn't read music, she needed mostly the timings of these moments and to insert them. So she had the libretto. The libretto in itself was a challenge because librettists, which are not very experienced, or maybe all librettists, I don't know, by experience, is they give me so much material that you can't use because the music tells the story. So in the end, the shape of the libretto, I had to do it, and I had to get rid of a lot. And I had two librettists. The first one provided me with beautiful poems, Mayra Santos Febres, and then a second person came to do some of the dialogues. And that's when I completed the score, is when the libretto was completed, because I had to shape it. And that is what was sent to LA, where Miwa Matrayek, our designer, is based. And she works from there very much in collaboration with Jean Laconnerie from France. So they could both be sort of in cahoots to what each other were doing.
Got a question from Zia. Zia, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. And thank you, Hilda. I think my question really relates to how to, I should say I'm a composition student, and I work quite a bit with particularly environmental concerns in my work, and I think that's because for me they feel very close to the bone, in a similar way to how you describe, I guess, although of course very different, but how you describe your relationship to gender and enslaved history and social justice in that way. And I guess I'd really like, I see all of these as being very closely related, and I'd like to essentially be a better white artist in my work, and I'd like to engage more with these issues, but I'm very aware of my privilege and of my position as a white artist. And so I guess my question is, what would you say about how to navigate that? Like, for instance, if I use spirituals, and if my intention in doing so is as an act of solidarity, or as a way of articulating a response, my own response, is that appropriative, and is that negative? And how else might I go about it, do you think, in a way which is appropriate? Thank you.
I cannot really tell you how to go about yourself. I think this is something you have to find for yourself, but I can share how it is for me. And for me, it is something that I have to be very careful, even with my own heritage. When I did the Imaginary Palace, which was the name of my first opera, because I quoted a lot of indigenous poetry of living indigenous poets. One second, please. 1 second. So sorry. Can you call a mini car? Because there's questions that still. Sorry, I thought I was going to finish earlier. Sorry. So it's just a matter of really inserting the material in a way that is appropriate for you, I would say, and that is true to you, and that you're honoring the origin of whatever material you're using.
Any more questions from anyone? Does anybody want to ask while we have Hilda with us? I'm looking to see whether there's, oh, Eva.
Hi, I've been trying to think of the best way to sort of phrase my question, so forgive me if it comes out a little bit clunky. There's a lot of discussion around how opera as an art form within classical music is particularly problematic in terms of race. You know, we have the Met, a very highly respected organisation, still, you know, until in the last 10 years, using blackface for productions of operas such as Othello, and you know, it can be very, very problematic. There's a lot of discussion around that. What, as a composer who's obviously working with sensitive subject matters that deal with that, and you're working with a singer who herself is a Black opera singer, what would you say are some of the kind of main challenges and changes that can be made? You know, like, it's all good and well saying you know, the kind of headline topics around kind of diversity and inclusion, but as somebody practicing in the field and making art, what would you say are the kind of main ways the opera as a specific genre can be more accessible to people of colour?
To be honest, I had a huge audience of Black people in Amsterdam on the day of the premiere, so I think the subject matter itself would be drawn for that kind of audience. And sadly, my opera about Mexico has never been performed in Mexico. So these matters are to do with promoters and promotion. It's not for artists.
Okay, so any final questions before we thank Hilda? Any final questions from anyone? I don't think. Okay, so it's my role to thank you for giving us an insight into this opera and into a historical subject that has great important resonances and also is very much at the forefront of our sort of national and international thinking at the moment. So thank you very much for that. And it's been a delight to welcome you here to the RNCM, and I'm pleased that you spoke to the composition students this afternoon as well. So you've met a number of our students as well as colleagues here and doctoral students. So thank you very much, and we hope to invite you back and see you in person in the near future. Thanks, Hilda.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everyone. There's no forum next week. It's half term. Lovely to see you, George. Annika, good to see you. And everyone else. Okay.